If you're a fan of scary movies, then you heard of the movie Orphan, but what you probably didn't know is that it actually is inspired by a real story. Before I continue, don't forget to subscribe and leave a thumbs up.
Are you afraid of the dark? Are you scared?
In the case of Barbara Skrilova, a 33-year-old woman who suffered from a rare disease that made her look younger, even though she seemed quite harmless, she was hiding pure evil. In the past, Barbara had used her illness pose as a child and be adopted by a generous family. It worked for some time, but after her violent behavior, Barbara was discovered and she had to leave. Having no other choice but to study at the university, she met the schizophrenic sisters Clara and Katerina Morova. Clara was a single mother of two. Her husband had abandoned her because of her aggressive character, so she decided to raise her children with Katerina, who was a woman with a very weak mind. Although not everything was perfect, life was going well for the family, until the sisters decided to invite Barbara to live with them. They did not imagine that they were opening the doors of their house to the devil. Barbara was a very intelligent and manipulative woman. However, sometimes she had episodes in which she really believed that she was a child. This is when the situation starts to get out of control because she begins to be jealous of Clara's children, and little by little she began to manipulate the sisters at her whim, getting them to punish the children unfairly. Real hell began when all three merciless women decided to lock the children in an iron cage in the basement. They left them without clothes, without food, not even a blanket to protect themselves from the cold. For months the children were subjected to inhuman and atrocious mistreatment. They were beaten, given electric shocks, burned with cigarettes, and only very occasionally bathed in buckets. It was impossible to imagine that the nightmare could get any worse, but the most brutal part of the story was yet to come. Barbara's twisted mind had no limits. Based on the story of Hansel and Gretel, she came up with a creepy idea, fattening up the poor children so she could eat from them. Time passed, and when the children were fuller, the greatest cruelty began. They cut off pieces of flesh from their legs. The cuts were so deep that the bone was almost exposed, and the worst is that the heartless women found a taste for human flesh, continuing to cut off other parts of their bodies, not even giving them medicine to relieve the pain of the little ones. One day Barbara decided to install a camera to watch the children, a camera that would end the tortured people's torment. One of their neighbors had a monitor to watch his baby, and on one occasion the man intercepted the transmission and saw the horrible scenes of terror that were happening near his house. After this event, he contacted the police immediately. When the authorities arrived at the women's house, the sisters were the ones who opened it. They tried to prevent the police from entering the basement, but their effort was in vain. The police did not give up, and when they went into the basement, they found Barbara lying on the floor begging for help, pretending to be a kid, and one more victim. The police then found the children locked up in the most deplorable state, with alarming health conditions. The children were taken to the emergency room, where one of them unfortunately died. Barbara was taken to a children's home, from which she escaped at night. The sisters were brought to trial, and for a time tried to cover up for Barbara, saying she was a child they had adopted, but then ended up telling the truth, that Barbara was a grown woman and had influenced them to commit those savage crimes. Clara and Katerina were sentenced to 12 years in prison. A year passed and Barbara was found, but now she was pretending to be a child genius and her name was Adam. A kind family had adopted her, and they had never noticed the true evil behind the child they loved. Barbara was sentenced to 5 years in prison but managed to get out in 2011, making it only 4 years. Another story that will leave you thinking is of Indiana couple Christine and Michael Barnett were well versed in raising children with special needs. In 2010, they adopted 6-year-old Natalia Grace from the Ukraine. She had a form of dwarfism that made it difficult for her to walk. Natalia had been in the US for about 2 years when she came to live with the Barnetts, coming to live with them after her last adopted family had given her up for undisclosed reason. After a while, Natalia started acting strangely. Christine reported that the girl was threatening the family, standing over them at night, and she even saw her once trying to pour bleach in Christine's morning coffee. Christine begins to suspect that Natalia was not actually a child and backs up this suspicion with Natalia's advanced vocabulary, lack of interest in toys, and medical tests which supposedly show Natalia as having the bone density and teeth of a teen or young adult, though later tests dispute these conclusions. Based on Christine's belief that Natalia was dangerous and running a scam, the Barnetts legally changed Natalia's age on her birth certificate to 22 years old in 2012, and then in 2013, they rented her an apartment and moved to Canada. Later, legal charges were waged against the Barnetts in 2014 when Natalia reported to the police that she had been abandoned by her family. The Barnetts were charged with 2 counts of felony neglect of a minor. Christine still maintains that Natalia is a dangerous adult running a scam, while Michael, now divorced from Christine, claims the couple knew the entire time that Natalia was a child, but Christine convinced everyone to lie about her age. Natalia's age is still up for debate, and legal action is ongoing to reverse the changes to her birth date that the Barnetts made. When asked about the case, Christine specifically referenced the 2009 film saying, "The movie Orphan is exactly what happened." In cases like this, reality causes more fear than a horror movie.